We had to work.
Exactly.
We had to work. We had to work to get there. But I realized that whatever it is, there's something I can do. And it's not just always handing out money. Nothing wrong with charity and giving money, but just giving other people a feeling that I matter. I matter in this world, and I might just be a Starbucks barista, but you matter. You matter. You matter. And I just try. I try to do the same thing my dad did. Make the eye contact.
Welcome to the Renegade Lawyer Podcast, the show where we ask the questions, why aren't more lawyers living flourishing lives and inspiring others? And can you really get wealthy while doing only the work you love with people you like? Many lawyers are. Get ready to hear from your host, Ben Glass, the founder of the law firm Ben Glass Law in Fairfax, Virginia, and Great Legal Marketing, an organization that helps good people succeed by coaching, inspiring, and supporting law firm owners. Join us for today's conversation.
Hey everyone, this is Ben. Welcome back to the Renegade Lawyer Podcast, where I get to interview interesting people inside and outside the legal profession who are making a ding in the world. And today, very special treat and guest, one of my longtime friends from the Dan Kennedy world, Dr. David Phelps. David has spoken for our group before at our Great Legal Marketing Summit. He is a dentist by original trade, but his real space in the world today is helping dentists who have been successful, have made money, helping them to diversify income sources, primarily through real estate, helping them keep the wealth that they have created and getting them out of the hours, dollars for hours work over their lifestyle. So as opposed to some of the other coaches that we interview on the podcast who are actually coaching about, the marketing and the practice building, David's really good at that. He has done that, but his specific space these days is really in the financial information, not just to doctors, but specifically to dentists. And David, I will tell you that there is nobody that I can find in the legal space delivering any financial information, let alone the financial information that you deliver to your dentist. And I know it in part where you deliver because I get David's Path to Freedom newsletter. And as I told you when I saw you a couple of days ago in Cleveland, it is one of the newsletters that I actually read when it comes. David is a prolific author. He's got his podcast, which is the Dentist Freedom Blueprint podcast. And again, he doesn't exclude you if you're not a dentist. He's marketing directly to dentists. We'll talk about that, the power of influence that we just came away from. And we are recording this just a day after David and I were both in Cleveland, Ohio, more specifically Independence, Ohio, with our good friend and mentor, longtime mentor, Dan Kennedy. Along with David, like a lot of your friends and my friends are 20-year plus friends from the Dan Kennedy world, with what I thought was a master class in psychology, the psychology of influence and persuasion. And before we went live, we were sort of riffing on that. So first, welcome. Thank you for carving out some time to be with us.
Well, it's great to be, as you said, on the heels of such a great meeting in Cleveland the last several days. Because I think the impact of that association with not only Dan Kennedy, who's been at the top of the mountain for all of us for all these years, but just the mix of our friends, our peer group, as you said, coming back together. Some who hadn't seen each other for some time. COVID got in the way, and Dan's health situation also dissipated some of the regular, getting together of the kind of mastermind alliance that we've all enjoyed. And it was just so powerful on many, many levels, as you said, Ben.
And David is one of the most unassuming. You could talk to David for an hour and not, unless you ask curious questions, not really learn anything about him. And David, I heard so many stories over the last couple of days of people who under the radar, you have helped, you have been of influence to, you have coached, you've helped personally. And so, from the viewpoint of the world, I think you're one of the people who I just love to talk to because you put positive energy into the world. I think you wake up every morning saying, how can I just go make it the positive energy to the world? No, sometimes I get stuff back from it. Sometimes I don't. But I think you living this life where you have chosen to just try to see how you can plus anyone's life who you come in contact with. And we talked about this a little bit at dinner the other night with our friends. And so again, like, thank you for that. I think maybe this comes from your dad, because you told a story at dinner about watching your father, who was I think a surgeon, certainly a
Yes.
physician and a
Yes.
surgeon, and just relay that. And then we'll come do your backstory. But you observed as a young man the way your dad treated people that he worked with in his profession. And if you could just share that, I think it's so important.
Yeah, Ben, I shared the story of just looking back in time and having the opportunity to tag along with my father, who was a surgeon, who would have to go make rounds. They call them rounds. Now they have hospitalists, but back in the day, surgeons that did surgery on their
Right.
patients during the week had to go on the weekends. Well, they went every day, but on the weekend, I was not in school. So I'd oftentimes tag along with dad on Saturday or Sunday. Kind of cool to go with your dad to the hospital. You get to go in the back door where all the doctors went in, all the cool stuff in the tunnel. And but the thing I remember most was that as I tagged along with my father as he worked his way, down the hallways and into the rooms and past other people. I don't mean patients, and I'm not talking about the other doctors. I'm talking about people who worked and served in the different capacities that, in this case, a hospital requires. Everybody from custodians, he knew their names, Ben. It wasn't just he knew their names. The ladies who worked the cafeteria line. So oftentimes Dad and I, if there, we'd like eat lunch, and we just go in there and eat lunch in the hospital cafeteria. And Dad would always take time to talk to somebody. It was just for, a brief, 2 seconds. And you think, well, he's a busy guy. He's got to get in and out and see all these people. And that's the way most of the surgeons were. And I'm not demeaning other really high quality surgeons, because we need them. I just realized in retrospect, that was a special quality that my dad had. And I think, some of that stuck. So to your point, I wasn't always this way in my life, Ben. There was certainly a period where it was all about me and me grinding away and more for me, and how much is enough, and the stuff I talk about today. But through my own life experiences and realizing that the gift that we have every day to live, what are we doing with that gift? What are we doing with it? And how can we sow in other people's lives? And just realizing when I watched my dad have that little conversation, that little directly to that lady who was checking out in the cafeteria line, or at the grocery store or convenience store, he would always look for an opportunity to engage people. And I thought, what is that? And he loved people. He actually really loved people. And I think many times we get tired of dealing with people, because there's a lot of issues in dealing with people and staff problems today, and customers that, or clients that, are very demanding. And yet, what can we do to inspire people and just try to sow seeds of more gratitude? And that's what we talked about that evening with the great dinner that we got to experience. Is like, we all think we have problems in our lives, and there's always challenges. There's always things to deal with. Some are very difficult, but many of the things that we deal with, first world problems. Other people are not in the place where we've been privileged, not because it was given to us. We had to work. We had to work to get there. But I realized that whatever it is there something I can do? And it's not just always handing out money. Nothing wrong with charity and giving money, but just giving other people a feeling that I matter. I matter in this world, and I might just be a Starbucks barista, but you matter. You matter. You matter. And I try to make the same thing my dad did. Make the eye contact, look them, if they've got a name tag on, or there's a way I can get their name. We go to a restaurant, right? First thing I ask before we even start taking orders, right? Hey, what's your name?
What's your name?
What's your name? Now I can call you by your name while you're serving us.
Yeah.
Now I've got more of a relationship, not just you're my server,
Yeah, yeah. And I follow up, like, tell me how long you worked here. And we ran into a fellow at the hotel restaurant, and I was surprised. He goes, 22 years. I said,
Yeah.
oh, man, you've seen a lot here. And he was there, serving us. And,
Yes.
here you made a really important point, because you said, I was not always that way.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have found so interesting as I move through the decades is that as an adult, you can change. We are not who we were at 18, 19, and even young in the profession, where, you and I were both grinding it out. You as a dentist, we'll talk about that in a second. Me as a young lawyer, neither one of us making any money, neither one of us knowing enough to actually be doing probably what we were doing. And under all sorts of pressures, trying to keep families happy, patients and clients happy. And it's really, really hard work. And I think so. One of the things that you and I think one of our, I don't like to call it an obligation, one of the things we're able to do is to reach back now to that next generation of of professionals in particular and say, you can get to this path of significance
Mm-hmm.
earlier. And what you have just described, David, costs nothing.
That's right.
Listen to the answer when they say their name.
Yes.
How are you doing? How was your day? Many of them, the third question I ask is this your only gig? And it's usually, as you know, their second or third gig, oftentimes of the day. And
That's right.
I tell lawyers, like, we have to stop, because our profession whines a lot. Oh, it's so hard. And the bar organizations reinforce this because they say, the default in the industry is sadness and depression. And we're going to teach you how to do it. They don't teach anyone how to build a better business or have an abundance mindset or charge higher fees or, only work with people that you like working with. They don't teach any of that stuff. So, we're kind of at war with that philosophically.
Well, we have the exact same thing in the dental industry. It's no different. It's no different. Exactly the same thing. A lot of whining, a lot of complaints, and yeah, it goes on and on.
And at the same time, though, you have guys and gals in your profession and mine who they're living the same life. They have practices. They're seeing patients. They're seeing clients, and they're happy. Mm-hmm. I heard a speaker recently, David, and I was at an event that I was also speaking at, but she was speaking at a different time. And she said, look, I can ask you 2 questions and know so much about you. She goes, number 1, do you like going to work? Yes or no? Mm-hmm. Number 2, do you like going home? Yes or no? Oh. And if either one of those, write that down. If either one of those,
you can tell I'm writing that one down. Yeah.
If either one of those isn't yes, let's work on solving for that. Let's get to the root of that. Wow. And just know that in your profession, there are people for whom both answers are an enthusiastic yes. And I think the job of anyone who wants to, as an adult who wants to change their life is, there's a certain place you can get by reading and showing up at seminars and things like that. But it really, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, it's like, who are you hanging out with? Who are the people that you associate with, listen to, share wins and losses and challenges and victories with? All right, so for those of you who don't know you, and probably not many in listening to this podcast will know you unless they were at the summit a few years ago. Let's talk a little bit about your backstory, because as we both have talked about, a dentist. So college and then dental school and then the practice world. And you're not there today. So let's just talk about that a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, Ben, I know I'm speaking to like-minded individuals, hardworking. You could make the grade, literally make the grade to get to where we got to in our respective professions. And what I realized today, again, I am not demeaning our professions at all. Law, dentistry, medicine, architecture, engineering, all very, very important, whatever we chose. I realized today, and I think a lot of our people, maybe not all, chose that path. Well, my father was a surgeon, so that I had a bent towards that. Okay, granted, but he didn't force me to do anything. My parents didn't. I think I looked at it from the standpoint, yes, there's respect. I understood that people that went into a profession had the higher education in that era were the ones who had a better lifestyle, right? So that appealed to me. But also, I felt like there was a level of safety and security in having a profession of that stature. And what I realized today, again, not demeaning that at all, is that the more that we seek safety and security, the more we give up our freedom. So that came to me down the road. So I went down that path. I deviated from medicine to dentistry because I had an orthodontist who I kind of adored, revered and I just thought, this guy's got better hours than my dad. So I'll go teeth. So that was why I did it. Again, no regrets. It was good. But I was in college in the 70s. I know we're the same era, so you can relate. And in between reading books on anatomy and physiology and physics and everything else and biology and all the stuff, I made time to read books on investing, like, being an investor. I always had this in me, like, I want to be an investor, whatever that means, right? I had no money, but I wanted to be an investor. And so I was trying to, get ahead of the game, right? Future pacing, thinking ahead. And so I read books about the stock market, and back then that's why mutual funds were coming out. And it's like, okay, that's what everybody talks about. Then I found some books on real estate, and I compared and contrasted the two as I was reading them. And it's like, the real estate thing made more sense to me primarily because it was a tangible asset, and I think I just like I like the control feature of,
You could
hey, there's
actually,
something
you could
yeah, I
actually
can see it, I can touch it, I
you
can
could
feel
visit
it. And the stuff on mutual funds, like, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I'm too separated from. So anyway, I went down the road, got my dad to co-invest with me in my first investment property back in 1980, and that turned out to be taught me some good lessons. It was profitable too, which was probably a key. I probably would have burned my hands if it would have gone downhill. But this was like during interest rates. So people think interest rates are high today. Well, our mortgage interest rate was 13.5%.
That's another
Yeah,
thing.
13.5. So I'm like today it's nothing, whatever you think it is. Anyway, we split a little over $50,000 in capital gain profit just during the hold period. I mean, nothing fancy. Yeah, we did a little upgrade, value add, the thing we talk about in real estate. So basic, simple model. My epiphany was I was waiting tables all the way through school. Good gig, higher end restaurant, made good tips. Back then, probably averaging 15 to 20 bucks an hour back in the early 80s. I mean, that's good money, right?
Yeah.
So, and the camaraderie, so all good, not a bad gig at all. But when I looked at how much I made over those 4 years waiting tables, not full time, but 2, 3, 4 nights a week, and my take on a capital gain asset, which by the way is taxed much lower than ordinary income, I thought, aha, for the amount of work I put into waiting tables, trading time for dollars, and the time I put into acquiring and managing a capital asset, my return was about 10x. That was a light bulb for me. It's like, So I took my half of the gain, the 25,000, give or take, and I parlay that into more properties, super leverage. I didn't even make money. Go ahead.
Was your dad or your mom, were they investors? Were they into real estate? Because I'm always curious, like where that initial bug.
I think, no, my parents were very traditional. My mother was a school teacher. My father, a physician. Really no entrepreneurial bent whatsoever. Very traditional. But I didn't drag him into the real estate thing. He just trusted me. And so, no, I think where it came from is just number one, Ben, curiosity. I just always, like you, I'm curious about lots of things in life. And looking back on my life, I recall that I lived in a good middle class home. We didn't lack for anything, but parents also didn't give us, myself and my sisters, anything. We played by, middle class rules of ethics in the family and your responsibilities. If I wanted a better bicycle, what kid doesn't, or for me, it was like tennis. I love playing tennis. And if I wanted better than a Kmart's gone, but if I wanted better than a Kmart racket, I wanted the better racket or the better shoes or the better strings. If I wanted those things, I had to figure out how to earn the capital, the money to do it. So I took on odd jobs and I parlayed out other kids in lawn jobs. So I kind of had this little mini lawn job thing going on, right? I mean, and I did the newspaper route and sold greeting cards door to door because I liked having some level of autonomy or independence, even when I was still living under my parents' roof. Okay, I wanted that.
I remember.
So I think that's where that came from. And I realized, again, my dad, great provider, but I also remember some of those conversations when I was old enough to hear him talking about. I still remember this one, Ben. He's talking about some Orange Grove syndication he put money into, back in the day, and how the whole thing went bust. I remember that. And I'm thinking, well, I don't want to, again, my dad was very smart, but not about his money. I mean, he's a good provider, disciplined, but in terms of investing, just like anybody, just like whatever was the deal of the day or whatever he put, whatever the group mentality was. We didn't have 401ks back then, but whatever it was, right? You put your money in whatever it was. And I think he was trying to be different, but trying things without having a knowledge base. And so I think I decided I'm just going to learn more about this outside of my focus, which was dentistry. I've got to learn something else. I've got to do these things, back to a Kennedy mantra, do things simultaneously, not sequentially.
Yours and my growing up years were very similar. And I can remember the first year that I went to a soccer camp, and I loved it because I grew up playing and got turned on by it. And it was back then, you could go to a week-long camp for $75. And I remember coming the end of the week, and they're like, who's coming back next year? And I raised my hand. And I was the oldest of 6, ultimately 7 kids at that time, probably 6. And I can remember coming back and in my bedroom, David, drawing a thermometer on the wall and with $75 at the top so that I could earn the money. Same thing, paper routes, cutting grass, so I could earn the money to go back to camp because I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And then I don't know, you probably don't know this, but in high school, so pre-internet, pre-soccer stores, big sports stores, like I would buy stuff from a place in New York through mail order, bringing down shoes, balls, and I was dealing out of my locker, right? To my friends who were on the soccer team, and like, hey, what size cleats do you need? Because you couldn't really get them any
Right.
place. They just weren't. And I don't know, because my dad, my mom, again, very normal, middle class, didn't lack, didn't want, big sports community for kids, but not investors. And we didn't sit around the breakfast table talking about Napoleon Hill or abundance thinking or any of that stuff. So I think for me, a lot of that changed. I mean, I had that urge, but I didn't know where to go and put it. I didn't place it. I didn't know who to go and get it from. And it wasn't really until later in my career when I found Dan, when I had started my own practice, got the magnetic marketing and start book, and started listening and hanging out with Dan Kennedy and being introduced. I was telling my team today when I came back, not only what Dan says on the stage, but all of the books and authors. I mean, I have a whole list just from the last 2 days of other books that I've read a long time ago, I haven't read recently, or never heard of.
Hey guys, this is Ben. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast, not just the marketing and practice building strategies, but the philosophy of the art of living your best life parts, you should know that my son Brian and I have built a tribe of like-minded lawyers who are living lives of their own design and creating tremendous value for the world within the structure of a law practice. We invite you to join us at the only membership organization for entrepreneurial lawyers that is run by 2 full-time practicing attorneys. Check us out at greatlegalmarketing.com.
And so now back to you. So you're someone who actually, as I recall, as you're going through dental school and starting early in the practice, you've already got this nascent real estate gig interest on the side. And so, but what was when you started out in practice, was your thought, your plan just, I'll do 30 years, 40 years, whatever, just like everybody else in the practice, and then see where we land and what happens next?
Yeah, I saw no destination that would let me do something different. I so plugged into my mind that whatever you went into from your studies, academics, vocation, whatever, that's what you did. And back in those days, that was still kind of the model. Today, of course, it's flipped 180 degrees and no one's going to be a status quo. But maybe, yes, you could still run in a profession. But even there, you've got to be iterating and changing as you've demonstrated so well.
Yeah.
So I think you just mentioned back pre-internet, where did we get our inspiration? And yeah, it had to be from books. It had to be from books. And then working back upstream from books or authors. And so that's what I did. Got interested in real estate. And I found obviously other books because, there'd be mentions of other people. And what I realized is that association with other people, outside of my profession. So the real estate people that I found through working back upstream, a little bit of trial and error, who are the real people, right? Because there's always people on the fringe that are just selling stuff. And you have to work your way through that. But finding those real people that, just like Dan, in business, mastery, marketing, psychology, I found people that it wasn't just real estate, the vehicle. Yes, it's a vehicle, but what was their mindset around real estate as a vehicle? And again, finding the right people, just like Dan, just an abundance of life lessons, not just how to do real estate, but I found an early mentor very similar to Dan in terms of his knowledge base, just widespread. And I remember just like we do with Dan, it's just like, I'm just hanging on to every word. I'm going, it's like, where did this guy come from? He's telling me things that inherently, I sort of knew were truths, but no one actually spelled them out. And I hadn't found the books yet, Napoleon Hill and others, hadn't found them yet. But he was like speaking these truths to me, and I'm just like writing them down like crazy. And I was just like, oh my gosh, and there was that inspiration that allowed me, I think, to keep my sanity while I was doing what I was trained to do, which is dentistry. And I think what I see so much in my colleagues is kind of like darkness. Life is not easy. It even in professions like we're blessed to have, is we've alluded to. It's many people don't get up, go to work because they enjoy it. So it's like, I have to go do it. I have to make this happen. I'm gonna give you a little side thing. I was talking to one of my colleagues who went to a dental meeting, but it was more about the exit, the big exit, the big private equity exit, which is a big deal today, consolidation, aggregation, and big multiples. And there's a dark horse in that as well. But they brought Andre Agassi, great tennis player. I know you've heard of him, all right?
Sure, yeah, yeah. I'm in the 70s.
Yeah. So Andre Agassi, great player, right? Well, if you read his book or heard him speak, he talks about the fact he never liked tennis. He never liked tennis. So why did he do it? Well, he's disciplined. Okay, got it. That's good. Discipline's good. But why did he keep driving to hit the levels he did? Because there were people that told him, well, you're gifted in this, pal. You need to do it. And he didn't like it. So his message to the crowd of dentists was, maybe this is okay for some people, but it was, don't worry that you don't like your life. Just grind it out to get to that perceived mountaintop. Of course, it was a corrupt message. It was built in this group to sell, in this case, dentists on grinding for some perceived big multiple that you'll get someday if you just grind it out. Be like Andre Agassi. And I thought, that's kind of sad. And I'm kind of sad for Andre, although I think he's living a great life and stuff. But it's kind of sad to hear that he lived all those years and didn't enjoy the journey.
Exactly. I mean, he should run for like the ABA presidency or something, because the message from the elites of the legal profession who have now recognized that, geez, so many people are depressed and frustrated with the profession is basically, what did you think it was going to be like? Yes, it's hard. Grind it out. We solo and small firm lawyers often poke fun with respect at big law. And,
Sure.
David, these kids come out of law school and making high 200s, 300K. And we're like, well, of course, because you're working two jobs. You're working two 45-hour jobs a week. So, yeah, you ought to be paid that. But I've talked to and represented big law lawyers who get some sort of disability and can't practice anymore. And I go, dude, there's an easier path to 300K than being on call 24/7, 365 days a year, flying all over the world. This guy was working at a big branded international law firm. And the sad thing, Dave, is he goes, no, there's not. And I go, well, actually there is. and the sad thing, and you probably see this in dentistry as well, is that the schools and the elites either don't know or don't want you to know about these entrepreneurial paths where, unlike, and I'm sad I'll have to go read the book now, Andre Agassi, but unlike someone who lives through and is, quote, successful at profession, but lives in a state of unhappiness, I mean, right. To me, that's not a good state to be in. Again, if you can solve for, do you like going to work? Do you like going home? Let's solve for that first. And now let's build a business around that and market their customers around that. There came a turning point, I know, in your life when it really hit you hard and you realized, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? And so if you're comfortable sharing and disclosing, talk a little bit what you went through with your daughter.
Sure, Ben. So I got married when I graduated from dental school. My wife and I had careers that we wanted to dedicate ourselves to. Mine dentistry, hers accounting, CPA. And so we didn't have a child on purpose for about 9 years. So I'm in my mid 30s, first child, blessing, right? All good, all good. So that I'm just going to say that gave me the opportunity to do this profession and this side gig, real estate. That was what I had the leeway to do it. So I didn't have children that I should have or would have felt not obligated, but I need to be there. So that's how I got to start in real estate. So we have our child when I'm 35, and she's a regular kid, age a little over 2 years old, and she's diagnosed with high-risk leukemia. So that's 3 years of just, it's unbelievable.
Really hard work. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so hard in many dimensions, and people that have dealt with it personally, you know what I'm talking about. Our marriage didn't make it through it. It's no fault. It was just, but that's the way it is. But we co-parented and everything turned out good from that standpoint. Our daughter Jenna, she had epileptic seizures for the next 4 years, on, off, not well controlled, taking all kinds of anti-seizure medications. And mostly her mom was having to deal with that because at that point we were separated. Age 12, end-stage liver failure. She's vomiting blood, liver's backing up. What happened? Well, all the chemo and seizure medication was just overrode her liver. So her liver's, it's gone. It's shot. It's like a 75-year-old alcoholic, whose liver's shot. Well, you expect it there. You don't expect it in a 12-year-old. So she, by the grace of God, another family donated the organs of their child who they lost in a tragic automobile accident. Forever, ever grateful to that family for being that generous, because our daughter lives because of their daughter's loss. It's a big thing, and I will never forget. We didn't get to meet the family, but it was just so thankful. Anyway, she gets the transplant. So you think, okay, it's we cross. To me, it was like, okay, we crossed one more hurdle. And I'm, back when she was diagnosed with leukemia, I just kind of kept grinding. Okay, I'll just make sure I support the family financially, let mom take care of, the child's needs, which were, horrific. I got to get out and live still kind of a halfway normal life, going to work where I could associate with other people. But it was when I was in the hospital when she was recovering from the liver transplant, which took some time to recover from that. It's not, it's day surgery, but it's not in and out. You're there for quite a while, and there's complications with that kind of thing. It's never a once and done. And that's where I really had the time to actually think. We get so busy then in our lives, the whole balance thing is really difficult. But I'm there for a purpose, because my daughter's life is at stake. Well, that's pretty good reason to give up all your other crap that you think is so important. Like, it's kind of a yank of the snapping of the leash. It's like, okay, David, wake up. When are you going to actually look at what is right in front of you, and what are your priorities? And so that's when I made the decision while she was in the hospital recovering. I did some back of the napkin math, right? That's all I needed to say, do I have enough? This is a question I pose to a lot of the people I work with. How much is enough? Well, for what? That's the next question. For what exactly? Everybody thinks, well, I have to have enough to, quote, retire. Okay, well, for all of you, that's way out here. Okay, what about today? What's enough for today so you actually can live your life a little bit today? And so my back of the napkin math was, do I have enough to take just some time off from the profession? Which meant, in this case, I decided to sell it. I didn't want to even be a remote owner. I learned how to do that later, but that was too much for me right there. I had too much. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to sell my baby. 20 years in practice. I'm going to sell the baby. I had a strong reason why. No guilt at all. No one's going to guilt me on this at all. No one would try. Sold it. I had the real estate. I had enough. I had enough in the money from the practice. I had enough. I knew how to put it in the real estate and how to generate, with certainty and predictability, X amount of income replacement. That's what it's about. It's income replacement. That's what gives you the freedom. It's not about some big number up here, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, whatever your financial advisor tells you need to shoot for to sustain your lifestyle after active income. No, it is about the income, but I realized that you don't need that much if you know what you're doing with your money. So that was my epiphany, as I took the time off. Maybe a year, maybe 18 months. I didn't know. I just needed that time off right then and there. I never went back. How come, David? Because I found there was a next for me. And it wasn't all about my technical skills, which certainly got me to a certain point in life. That was great. It was more about really what was in my heart as an entrepreneur. And what I learned through all the lessons of my life, I had people asking me, this was probably the key, it's like prompted me to my next. I had people ask me, not hundreds, I'm talking about a handful that knew me. All right, David, I understand why you sold the practice, but how could you do that? There's no way, we can't do that. I mean, you have to work till your 60s, don't you? I said, I'll show you and that's what I would tell them. I did this real estate on the side. Well, I'll be glad to show you, but you're probably not going to want to do it the way I did it, because you're decades older than I was when I started. There's a time value that you have that probably is not going to make sense for you to go out and do it the way I did it. So they basically piggybacked on some of my investments. And that's what led to other people asking me. I said, well, how can I do kind of a one to many being maybe 8 or 9 or 12, not 100? How can I thought, well, let me just get these people together, because they all ask me the same questions, right? So instead of just one-off conversations, which I'm happy to have, but there's a limit on how much. So, well, maybe I just get these people together. They're asking the same questions. They all want to see if there's an alternative path that might enlighten them. So I'll just get them together. And that was kind of the nidus of, the mastermind concept that we both know. Just, very low level organization, but just sewing in. And then more would come. And so, okay, how am I going to serve them? Because I don't want to be the one going out and making all the deals. That's another business. I don't want to get that.
Just one job to the next.
One job to the next. So how can I make that work? And I started, again, this didn't just come to me by myself. This is a key. You don't get the best ideas solo. I planted myself around other people. Back to association. Other people in other businesses, not just real estate or dentistry, but other businesses who could see things that I couldn't see about my life and what I'd sort of figured out. I just couldn't see it. I mean, to me, everything was separate, right? I didn't see anything correlated. And it took me a while to get it. And then it's like, well, I'll just test this and see. And it just started to build, and I just enjoyed it so much and have enjoyed it. No regrets. I just never went back to dentistry. I could still go do some dentistry. I don't know how confident I'd be today, but I could do it. I know it's not taken away from me, but you know what? It served me well, and now I love what I do today. So that's kind of how all that came about.
Well, there's so many things to unpack from that. Number one, I found this as a young person, the traditional wealth building advice to be overwhelming, because the question that every traditional financial expert says is, first they asking me, like, how much, like, what's your number?
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer. Like, how would I even know 30 and 40 years ago, quote, what my number is? I didn't know like my numbers, and I didn't have like big numbers back then. And so I know that in one of the marketing strategies, and we talked about this with Dan in Cleveland, is, to be against something or against someone. And so you have built a business that is against the common traditional philosophy of work your ass off, get to a number, stop working, and hope that you're right on the projection of how long you have to live, number one. Number two, how much it's going to cost you to live. There was a very interesting discussion after you left Wednesday and a guy asked Dan a question about his health journey and about hospice care. And so it was a very interesting philosophical discussion about how we as a country deal with the death and dying. And after we deal with, like, we've sucked all the money out for healthcare, but now we've decided that you're going to pass away. And apparently there's like 25% of people in hospice don't pass away, they stay and live longer. But so, how could anybody, let alone a young professional, give a financial planner, oh, here's the number I need to get to, with all of those variables? And so, you found this world and then had other people, I think, find you with this, at that time, sort of non-traditional, probably still today, like non-traditional, if you just look at the universe writ large, is how can we produce passive income that we don't have to worry about, like, quote, running out because we own physical assets that produce money. And then then the challenge for folks who kind of find that space is the same challenge you already alluded to, is, okay, who do I listen to? How do I decide? So let me ask you that, because there's no one in legal who is the David Phelps of legal. So lawyers, like, that's a space, if somebody wants to get into it and be like the financial advisor for lawyers, there's a space there. But let me just ask you, because a lot of the lawyers I coach, mature practices, they're high income earners, they do have created wealth, but not all of them are into real estate. And it's got some younger ones that have a great path upward and would be interested in that. So just talk to us for a minute about how would you go about vetting who to, or maybe you have some particular gurus or philosophers in passive real estate investing that you would point someone to, or book or set of books, David, to at least start along the sort of an authentic, honest route towards education first.
Well, I'm not here to sell myself at all. There's nothing about this conversation. It's about me. It's a message. But when you ask about resources or books, and speaking to our colleagues where they are at, I think that's what differentiates me. There are certainly good teachers of real estate. There's good philosophical, but most of it is for operators in real estate. Most everything today that you go out there and find is about operators, being the active participant, being the GP, general partner. That's what the whole world is about today, is being that person. And it's been a great run the last 14 years. I think we're seeing the other side of it now. But I think the reason I just say, some of the books I've written are focused on who we're speaking to primarily today, those who already have a strong business or profession, but would like to say, how could I get into alternatives? Which, again, unless you have some bandwidth or you've got family members or kids that have entrepreneurial bent and want to do real estate, that's one way you could do it, but that's not going to be for very many. So how do you do it when your focus is on family and your primary business, your engine, which you don't want to take your eyes off that ball? at all, and just for some greener pasture, because real
Especially
estate's not.
most of our lawyers, like, they have really good businesses. Those businesses are
Yeah, no, yeah,
thriving.
yeah, yeah. You don't turn away from that and go, oh, I've heard about all this money in real estate, because it's a business.
Yeah,
To make the bucks in real estate that people have. Again, I will just say this: we've had great tailwinds. Okay, the tailwinds of the economy in all aspects. Well, in many cases, businesses, except ours are being marginalized to some degree by external forces, which is what you push against and I push against. But in terms of asset appreciation and multiples, there's been huge tailwinds for reasons we don't have to go into today, but just trust us, right, Ben? And so people haven't seen the other side, so they think there's grass is greener. Well, I could go do that too. Everybody else is doing it. It looks easy because, well, we haven't had a correction for 14 years. So we're talking about, how do you get involved in alternatives on more of a passive, and I say passive in air quotes because you've got to be a little semi-active. Now, I'm not talking about dealing with tenants or contractors or you're flipping properties or being an active manager. I'm saying, but again, who are the cohorts that you might deal with? So you have to have some understanding about some basic principles. So some of the books I've written, which I'm not going to delineate them, they're on Amazon. That I actually co-wrote one with Dan Kennedy, 2 years ago, called "Own Your Freedom." So you get some of me and Dan. I think it's a great book because you get Dan,
book. Yeah, because I got
Dan, and some of my,
yeah.
and so we kind of, so there's some conceptual. It's philosophical, right? I'm not going to teach you how to go out and flip properties, but it's the philosophical aspect. Everything that you would partner with in life, and I say when you're a passive investor, it is a form of a partnership. The person, the is the key, and the asset is secondary. So you've just got to learn how to do the vetting and the due diligence. That's a key part of anything in life, right, Ben? We know we talk to our colleagues about partnerships and associateships in their business and how they fall apart all the time because nobody knows. Nobody is. You do it once and you get your hands burned. So same thing with real estate. Is who do you know? That's the opportunity with real estate because it's an inefficient market. But the inefficiency means you've got to expend some amount of time, or you pay to play, which is what I call collapsing time, folding time, by finding people like you that guide your people through the constructs of a better business lifestyle. Well, somebody's already figured it out, and your time's valuable. You just got to find those people. So that's the best I can give you without someone saying, oh, I'm going to get some how-to books because I'm smart. I got through school. I can do this stuff. I can pass the test. Yes, you can. But you're getting into a whole other world. Probably at a bad time in the market to be test driving some of the concepts that work in the last 14 years. I'll just kind of leave it there.
Well, but at least having a Sherpa who can guide you through whatever is coming, right?
Yeah.
Because at our age, we have lived through cycles of financial growth and financial stagnation and
Yes.
inflation and deflation. And you're right, it is again, my comment earlier, lawyers need to stop whining. And I can remember like early married, first house, I think the mortgage rate was like 18% or something.
Yeah, right.
And we were young, like we were getting a house, so it was great.
Absolutely.
It was great. Let me touch on something here as we come to an end, because we spent 2 days with our friend Dan Kennedy. It was about influence, and Dan started the whole seminar with something that you just alluded to, which is, whether you're marketing a professional practice or you want to have influence and power over any group, is that this philosophical alignment is so important. And you said the book you and Dan wrote together is mainly about philosophy. Mm-hmm. If people read my books on, quote, lawyer marketing, or I wrote a book last year on how to be a better teenage soccer referee, if you actually go study the books, they are philosophy books. They are mindset books.
Yes.
So Dan talked about really knowing, sort of really having whatever your tribe is, having them agree to certain way, the facts, the way you look at the world, and a certain philosophy. And I went on your website. I just have you comment on this. So over at the Freedom Founders website, you have a place for prospects who are looking, and maybe they've heard Dave Phelps' name and read the book, and they go, and you have a section called "You would be a good fit," and "You would not be a good fit." And I'll just real quickly read it. You'd be a good fit if you're coachable, you're ready to diversify outside of Wall Street, you don't have the time or energy to do this yourself, you've got at least $1 million of available capital, and you've got a well-managed debt to income ratio. But then importantly, you have a section there that like I'm not your guy. If you're just getting started in real estate investing, or you're starting your career, you're just kind of curious and poking around, you prefer to do it yourself. I'm not your guy if you want to do it yourself. You have a high debt to income ratio or less than $1 million of investable capital. So in writing that, I'm putting it on the website and being really clear. What is your purpose in doing that?
Yeah, purpose is to attract the people that I feel confident I can help and that I will enjoy helping. So success both ways is seeing the people I work with get the transformation that they want, but also people that I know there's good alignment. There's deeper aspects, but that's the outline criteria. And so that way we're not wasting people's time. And I'm happy to point people who are not ready for what we do, not because of bad character, but just, there's other steps they need to take before they do what we do. And many times that's optimizing the opportunities right in front of them, which is usually their business, right? So if I'm clear cut about who I'm for or work best with and who I'm not for, then there's some additional clarity or meeting of the minds before we even go deeper. And that just saves people a lot of time.
Lawyers struggle with this because we're taught in law school to help people. Many lawyers went to law school to help people. The profession says to help people. I know you had our friend Dustin Burleson on your podcast for a 2-episode program just recently. And Dustin is I would say from the outside, he's a great guy, but a very high-end market in his dental and his orthodontics practice. So did you struggle at all? And maybe you did this in your practice as well, or maybe you didn't know to do it back then, but did you struggle at all in saying, look, I'm sorry, but I have to exclude people who I could help. I am smart enough to help on this journey, but it's not who I like working with. It's not going to be best for me. It's probably going to irritate me and irritate them. Yeah. And if so, help us work through that. Because I think a lot of lawyers feel guilty about saying, in our practice, we can't do, we could help on the smaller case. We obviously have the technical skills to do that, but we don't want them. And it's just not our avatar. I'm curious how you think about that.
Yeah, no, I do think about it. And we have a whole component underneath the umbrella of Freedom Founders that we call next gen. Not even focused on people that necessarily want to do real estate or be in dentistry. It's just like the younger adults. So so one thing we do is we invite them, they're our members' kids, right? Adult kids, to come to our events. We do special breakouts for them. So that's one way to serve next gen. Now, in terms of younger dentists, my real affinity, when they reach out, so what I do is twice a year, I do a 4-week online, I call it, a 30-day blueprint, which I'm not setting them up to do investing, in the stuff we do. I'm just giving them the key philosophical concepts to hopefully help them steer the right way, and then give them other resources to take them to their next. That's my best way of giving back, and not just telling those people, stiff arming them and saying, so sorry, just wait till you get here. If there are things I can do or point them in the right direction, I think that's what we do. So yeah, I understand, we want to serve. We Ben, we'd just love to save the world. I mean,
yeah.
We would. I care for people. I care for animals. It's like, oh my gosh, I'd like to go take all the animals out of the shelter and just, adopt them all or foster it. I can only do so much. So if I could just help enough people that I do have the time and propensity to be able to help, that hopefully there's a ripple effect that will take on. I think that's what we have to look at life, because there's so many problems in this world, so many people we can help. Just walk out the street in your neighborhood, go to your town, and it's like, yeah, you can just turn the corner and just all kinds of people. So we just have to look at, well, how can we have the most amount of impact, but without excluding other people? So how do we give to them, or how do we support other people who are supporting them, right? Or whether it's time or money. So I have to look at that from that standpoint. And maybe that's something, again, like helping in dentistry, giving money to organizations that do help, the needy, community clinics and things like that need support, they need supplies, they need money. So I think there's ways we can still feed in that without having to be on the front lines of it, unless that's the area you choose. And if it's the area you choose, then man, go for it. Do it with all the gusto you have.
100%. I chuckled when you mentioned the animal thing, because I've been out of the office for 2 weeks now, and I came back. There's nothing on my desk. Like, they didn't actually need me here, I guess. But this morning, Sandy, my wife, and we've got 9 kids, and you may not know, we've fostered over 60 dogs as well over the years.
Oh, I didn't know that many.
Like,
oh my gosh.
Let me show you some pictures. And I go, oh,
wow.
Yeah, it's been part of the journey. And another time, inflation, we can talk about what our kids have taught us about brain science
Yes.
and being kind. But here's the thing I think you're doing, like by doing your own podcast, being gracious that you're on my podcast and sharing not only the technical, but if you and I can just help move the needle of that, everyone else that we kind of associate with, to say, look, it's just not that hard, I don't think, to reach your hand down and say, look, I can't do everything for everybody, but here's a resource. Here's some things that I am doing, and I'm really good at the things I am doing. Right. So I run this Lunch with Ben program, lunchwithben.com. Anyone can schedule it for the price of you send me the salad or the sub sandwich. Like, I'll talk with you over my lunch hour, just as we're talking here. And so, and I think that's almost like our biggest lever point, David, is getting other people who maybe have not been introduced to this world of abundance mentality, to the world of, I mean, you and I were in a room the other night with some of the most, quote, famous people in marketing, some of whom, have just rocked the world, both wealth-wise and impact-wise. And you saw, like, they all are humble and gracious. And I think are willing to help people who are interested in, like, what's the next step on the ladder here. So let me ask you, so awesome. So dental, Time Freedom for Lawyers is my son's podcast. You're all about freedom for dentists. It's not clear to me, but if some attorney wants into your group, your world, are they excluded? And it's okay to say yes. I'm just not even sure of the answer.
No, we don't have all dentists and we don't have all healthcare professionals. Now, that's primarily what we have, but we don't talk about anything that's clinical to, medicine or dentistry. We do talk about business. Certainly, there's a lot about business and everything. Business is business. So, no, we wouldn't exclude anybody. It's about character, like-mindedness. So whether it's an attorney or we have a concrete construction guy in our group, we had a traditional financial planner in our group. I mean, who actually is like, what you guys are doing is like, so no, I'm looking for character mindset. I think diversity in this way, this kind of diversity is good. It actually adds to the conversation. And our dentists appreciate rubbing elbows, if you will, with other people who are in other businesses, and they go, "Oh, it's not just me." It's like a revelation. It's not just us. It's like, I think it's healthy. So no, we would welcome conversations with people who have an interest.
So do two things for me: the URL people can go to, and the book that you and Dan wrote together. The title again, and we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, the title is "Own Your Freedom." It's available on Amazon. And then the URL for Freedom Founders would just be freedomfounders.com.
Awesome.
As you said, there's a place on there for people can set up a discovery call to talk to us if they'd like to do that.
Well, I thank you, because I know you've been out of the office and in lovely Independence, Ohio. I see from the schedule in your newsletter you've got a busy rest of the summer schedule as well, with your own groups and speaking outside of your groups and all that stuff. So I appreciate you taking the time. Share it with me.
Ben, it's always a pleasure. It was great to see you this week. Great to talk to you today. And just keep living life and your values the way that you go forward. It's just been a pleasure and honor to know you and spend time with you today.
We'll do it, sir. Thank you very much. David Phelps.
If you like what you just heard on the Renegade Lawyer podcast, you may be a perfect fit for the great legal marketing community. Law firm owners across the country are becoming heroes to their families and icons in their communities. They've gone renegade by rejecting the status quo of the legal profession so they can deliver high-quality legal services coupled with top-notch customer service to clients who pay, stay, and refer. Learn more at greatlegalmarketing.com. That's greatlegalmarketing.com.